Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
If you've heard of Grants Pass, Oregon, I'm pretty sure I know why.
Tomorrow, a very big day. Oregon is going to be front and center at the U.S. Supreme Court.
Earlier this year, lawyers for Grants Pass found themselves in front of the Supreme Court.
This morning, the Supreme Court is tackling its biggest case on homelessness in more than 40 years, as cities and towns across the country struggle to deal with more and more people living on the streets.
Grants Pass wanted to know just how hard they could crack down on homelessness. The town's made up of just 40,000 people. Hundreds of them are living in tents.
Grants Pass in southern Oregon bans camping in public places, like parks and sidewalks. Violators face a $295 fine or jail.
But with no public shelters in Grants Pass, a group of homeless residents sued the city in federal court, arguing that the law is unconstitutional because it violates the 8th Amendment's ban on cruel and unusual punishment.
Just for a moment, though, I want to tell you about a very different Grants Pass. The Grants Pass of Dr. Bruce Murray. Bruce moved here decades ago. He says Grants Pass was the ideal place to raise his son. It helps that Bruce is a fly fisherman, a self-described drift boat guy.
We live on a beautiful piece of property, 5 acres outside of town, which is basically our respite. It has my garden, and it has all my fruit trees and vegetables and berries, and we have cherries, blueberries, and strawberries today that for picking. So this is really our happy place.
I wonder what it was like over the last few months to have a lot of different people thinking and talking about Grants Pass, people who don't live there.
It's been an experience. On any given day, we're either in the crosshairs or we're in the limelight.
Until a few years ago, Bruce admits he didn't pay a lot of attention to the growing homeless population in town. First, he was busy with his private practice. Then he retired, traveled abroad to do charity work in refugee camps. When COVID shut everything down, he started looking for volunteer opportunities closer to home, which is how he ended up working with people living in parks.
I had some people that I was seeing in the shelter that needed far more than I could provide in terms of healthcare.
Why? What kind of things were they struggling with?
I've been following one man for the last 2.5 years that has severe heart disease at 56, which resulted also in kidney disease, multiple admissions to an ICU. And even though he was eligible for the Oregon Health Plan, he had none of the usual ways to engage with healthcare. And I am still working with him daily. Actually, I saw him yesterday, 2.5 years later, still doesn't have disability, still doesn't have access to a phone regularly, still doesn't have hygiene. I saw him because he was sick and vomiting, very dehydrated. That's probably the 20th time I've intervened in his health care. And that's not uncommon. That could apply to people I see every week.
That sounds like a nightmare for you as a physician.
It's what I kind of thought I was supposed to do when I went to medical school.
Help the most vulnerable.
Yes. We have so much. I have so much. I'm so grateful. I live in a beautiful house with property and all the access to the outdoors that I want. And yet in the same town, we have people that don't have running water, a place to brush their teeth, and the dignity to take a shower and get clean clothes on. That's a travesty.
Bruce is currently waiting to hear what the Supreme Court makes of his town. He's not alone. The justices are slotted to weigh in on all kinds of things. Who can get emergency abortions in Idaho? who can receive reparations of a sort from opioid manufacturers. This month, we decided we wanted to tell you the stories of the folks behind these Supreme Court cases. Because what's at stake for them is very personal. Today on the show, the Supreme Court is weighing how to punish the homeless. Dr. Bruce Murray is weighing how to save them. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This episode is brought to you by Discover. When it comes to your finances, Discover wants you to know they are the credit card that is always there for you. With 24/7 U.S.-based live customer service, everyone has the option to talk to a real person anytime, day or night. Yep, that means no more waiting for, quote, normal business hours just to get a hold of someone. We are talking real service from real people whenever you need it. Get the customer service you deserve with Discover. Limitations apply. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
It's hard to imagine a world where we leave future generations with fewer rights and freedoms. The Supreme Court has stolen the constitutional right to control our bodies. Now politicians in nearly every state have introduced bills that would block people from getting the essential sexual and reproductive care they need, including abortion. Planned Parenthood believes everyone deserves access to care. It's a human right. We won't give up and we won't back down. Help ensure the next generation can decide their own futures. Donate to Planned Parenthood. Visit plannedparenthood.org/future.
Despite being retired since 2017, Dr. Bruce Murray never really stopped working. He doesn't like having idle hands. In the last couple of years, he's been working with an organization called the Mobile Integrative Navigation Team. That's MINT for short. He and some nurse colleagues named Cassie and Leah offer the homeless community health care out of a van once a week. He's on call, too.
I get called for medical issues and complications, and that can occur 5 to 7 days a week. I go into the parks to see people and do consults and see people with at least 2 to 3 times a week. But my wife is a wonderful wound specialist. She ran an urgent care clinic for 30 years. She's superb.
You've called her a wound god.
I have a wound goddess, I've been told. I said God and I got in trouble. It's a wound goddess.
Why would people living in the park need someone to deal with their wounds? What's happening with them? Why are they getting so injured?
Well, just inadequate shoes, which is a problem summer, winter, fall, spring. They get cuts. They fall down. They're sleeping on the ground. They're trying to fix food the best they can. They burn themselves. There's a myriad of reasons, insects, bug bites, all kinds of things. And it takes only a few days to go from an infection that you and I would go in the bathroom and wash with soap and water and put a little ointment on and a Band-Aid and then shower later and look at it. Well, in the parks, you can have a minor cut that can result in life-threatening sepsis within just a few days. And we lose people because of that. They don't have a place to wash.
Have you lost a patient because they got an infection?
Oh, gosh, yes. Oh, yes. That is not unusual at all. They come in. At least we can reach them earlier now. So I can proudly say we're not seeing as much as we did a couple of years ago because they know where we will be and how they can reach us and that we're their bridge to healthcare. And that's what we do on Thursdays is we see I would say 5 to 10 people in our van moving around, and probably 2/3 of them are early infections now, and we congratulate them on reaching out for care early. So it's hard to keep statistics because you don't know what would have happened if we weren't there, but I can't think of anybody that's died of sepsis due to an infection in the parks in the last 6 to 8 months at least. So maybe we're making a small difference.
That's a pretty optimistic spin to put on things, given that it's clear you can think of people who died of sepsis.
Yeah, but even one is too many. I mean, We have the resources. We have the ability to do better, to provide better medical care. And we expect our program's going to grow. We've gotten funding now for MINT to have its own shelter. to have its own resource center within walking distance of the parks where people can come and, get appointments with DHS and housing and food stamps and mental health counseling and substance use discussions and hopefully diversion and rehabilitation. And just also a place where they can just come and be welcomed and not abused.
How do you develop a trusting physician-patient relationship with someone in those circumstances?
That's actually a funny story. For the first year that I went out with Cassie, the nurse, and then a public health person, Leah Swanson is really the founder of MENT. 3 years ago during COVID, she was out there taking a wagon of vaccines and water and dog food and then Narcan to the parks in a toy wagon and a child's wagon in the parks because they had no access to get to the hospitals or the health centers for vaccines. And so she started it. I was invited to be the doctor, but it was pretty clear that if a white male doctor came and tried to just offer healthcare in the park, it wouldn't work. So for the first year, I was not known as the doctor. I was the barista. I made gallons of coffee every week. And on Thursdays, we would set up shop without a van, just under a tent or under a tree, and offer coffee and those same basic needs. And I was known as the coffee guy before I was known as a doctor.
It seems to me, just from the reading around that I've done about what's happening in Grants Pass, that the city, even though they can't make sleeping outdoors illegal because they're waiting on the Supreme Court to make a decision here, they've found lots of ways to make life harder if you're unhoused in Grants Pass. They've put in place fines if you stay in one place too long. They've shut off water at some parks, locked the bathrooms so people can't use those facilities. Can you tell me what that means for the people that you treat?
Good. I like the way you finished that because I really don't want to talk about the politics because that's not my field. But the effect of policies, of frequent moving and not providing basic services, number one, it's incredibly dehumanizing to be told that you're not even worth a faucet, not even worth a bathroom, that you should move and you should move frequently and you get cited. And I'm sure you're aware, even I'm aware as a physician, that if you get cited for trespassing or living outside illegally, that totally impacts your ability to get housing. It's like being evicted. When you get evicted, you go to the bottom of the list, not the top of the list for when housing becomes available. So they're compounding the problem politically. It's not a secret. This is a conservative area. And as such, people don't ask why this person is homeless. They just don't like the fact that they're taking space in a public park. And I think they overestimate the dangers. It's well known that violence involving people that are homeless is generally directed at the homeless, not the other way around.
I'm sure members of the city council would say, well, we have to draw a line. We're cutting off access to water because, we need to have these facilities in working order for the families who are using our parks. And, this makes having so many people camping, using them as their house, essentially makes things uncomfortable for the local residents. Like, what would you say to someone who says that?
Well, we want people out of the parks too. And we emphasize that repeatedly. This is not a place to live. This is not conducive to good physical or mental health or quality outcomes. Josephine County does not have a shelter any longer. As I mentioned, it closed more than a year ago. We ran the warming shelter with city approval and some support this winter for when it would get below 32 degrees. We could open a shelter at night only and provided safe circumstances and food and water and brief medical care if needed. But, other than that, we had to close down when the weather improved.
There is the Gospel Rescue Mission, right?
Yes, and I'm sure you know that it has its rules and its regulations, and it doesn't run at full occupancy.
Is it a shelter technically, or or is there another name for what they do there?
It's in its name. It is the Gospel Rescue Shelter and Mission, and it's a national organization, Christian organization, and they have rules. Men and women can't be there together. They don't take anybody with medical issues or someone that they deem medically fragile. You can't take your dogs or pets there. That's a big barrier. You need to do some type of work to help maintain the place during the day. That's if you're disabled or in a wheelchair, you get disqualified because you can't do that. Have shelter. It's a lovely building, but unfortunately, they have also broadcast recently that they don't approve of what we're doing. So we are glad that they're housing some people, but we're not really in partnership with them.
Yeah, I was looking at an interview with the leader of the Gospel Rescue Mission there in Grants Pass, the one shelter. He was quoted as saying that basically putting limits on homelessness was a good thing. Like he talked about fining people who sleep in the parks, for instance. He compared it to when he got a speeding ticket as a teenager. He said, that made me think twice before speeding again. What is that point of view misunderstanding about the people?
Well, he had a choice, didn't he? He had a choice to drive or not to drive. I bet he didn't have a choice as to where he tried to sleep at night. So we're talking about something that's as vital as breathing. So I think it's the alternatives that those of us that are privileged to have, all the nice things in life, really have a very hard time understanding why someone would be out there and why they would risk repeated citing and trespassing. And if the word trespass comes up, you're then banned from a park for 30 days. The tickets accumulate and there's no way to pay them. But now, instead of moving up the ranks in the housing queue, you're penalized and you may be ineligible, just as if you had been evicted from an apartment. So I don't think that's a fair analogy, a speeding ticket versus being penalized for doing something that we all are required to do daily, which is sleep.
You've said you don't like talking about politics, which is hard because so much of what's happening in Grants Pass is really political. Like it sounds like back in 2013, the city council held a meeting where they wanted to, quote unquote, find solutions to homelessness. And at that meeting, one of the city council members, the city council president, said they wanted to come up with ways to make it uncomfortable enough for homeless people in the city so they'd want to move on down the road.
Right.
Have you considered going to a city council meeting and talking?
Oh, I go frequently. I've been on that circuit for a year along with other members of our team.
So what do you tell them when you go to a city council meeting? And do you feel like you're being heard?
I do think we're being heard. And I don't know whether it was the Supreme Court looming over this or what, but like I said, there's been an improvement compared to a year ago when we went and there were picketers outside and epithets being thrown and the city council was not in our favor. But we've been back multiple times to the city council and, we have representatives from the parks that go with us. I think we had 13 people living in homelessness who went last June, and it was a very impressive parade of people saying, I'm just asking for dignity and some help. They've graphically expressed the fact that they were real people. They were seen, they were heard. And like I said, the city council did help us this winter with getting funding for a warming shelter. And it looks like they're going to approve our site plan for moving on with a permanent shelter and a resource center. So I think there's been significant movement. And so I don't want to do anything that would rock that boat.
After the break, the real dangers of allowing so many people to sleep in the public parks of Grants Pass. This episode is brought to you by Washington Wise. Decisions made in Washington affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Listen to Washington Wise, an original podcast for investors from Charles Schwab, to hear stories making news right now. Host Mike Townsend, Charles Schwab's managing director for legislative and regulatory affairs, takes a nonpartisan look at the stories that matter most to investors, including the policy initiatives for retirement savings, taxes and trade, inflation fears, the Federal Reserve, and how regulatory developments can affect companies, sectors, and even the entire market. Mike and his guests offer their perspective on how policy changes could affect what you do with your portfolio. Download the latest episode and follow at schwab.com/WashingtonWise or wherever you listen. This episode is brought to you by Discover. When it comes to your finances, Discover wants you to know they are the credit card that is always there for you. With 24/7 U.S.-based live customer service, everyone has the option to talk to a real person anytime, day or night. Yep, that means no more waiting for, quote, normal business hours just to get a hold of someone. We are talking real service from real people whenever you need it. Get the customer service you deserve with Discover. Limitations apply. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. You know, a year ago, there was a murder in Riverside Park, which is one of the places the unhoused are living in Grants Pass. It was one homeless man who killed another. Did you know any of the people involved in what happened there?
I didn't know the people that were directly involved. One was someone passing through town who got in a fight with someone who was living in Riverside Park. We were all very aware of the situation within just a couple hours. The unfortunate thing was that several people that we know very well were witnesses to it and already had mental health challenges. And it became a whole lot worse for them. The repercussions of that were serious to those that were witnesses. They were traumatized yet again. And the community reacted by closing down the park for many days. And then they started moving people every 3 days, requiring that they move every 3 days. So it made things even harder.
Yeah, was that said to be for people's safety?
They didn't say, they just said these are the new rules. And so instead of having to move every 3 days, 10 feet or 20 feet just to a different piece of ground, I guess so the grass wouldn't die, they said now you have to move at a minimum to a different park. And the parks are 1 to 2 miles apart. So, it's hard to do that on your back or on a bicycle. So if you're disabled. So it definitely, things ramped up after that. But yet we've had vigilante groups, particularly older teenagers, attacking people in the parks recently without cause, just going around and kicking tents, not even knowing who's inside, and injuring several people. That didn't get nearly as much publicity, and there were no rules changed.
You said that the people you work with worry about being attacked a lot. As someone who works with those people, do you fear for your safety too? Do you ever feel the presence of other people and think, I don't know if those are friendly eyes?
Well, every population has their bad apples, and I wouldn't say ours is immune. I work primarily in the parks. We feel very safe. I feel threatened more by the people that roll by in their cars and yell obscenities at us. That's the threat.
Yeah, tell me about that, because that seems so wild to me.
Well, they don't want us there, and they will come by and they'll break out their video cameras and I'm happy. I wave at them and say, I'm Dr. Bruce. I'm here to help people. And then they turn off the video cameras and move away. There was a man not too long ago when we had the warming shelter who has clear mental illness, clearly, but he was pushing his own cart down the sidewalk on a public property, and a man came screaming out of his apartment and just started berating this guy. And I could just see him kind of cowering, but he's yelling back, and he never left the sidewalk. He never got near this man's front door. And so I walked down there and I said, "Can I help? I know this gentleman and I don't think he's threatening you." "No, but he shouldn't be here. We're tired of people loitering around here and I've just had it." So we tried to diffuse it, and I helped the gentleman back to the shelter, and we were able to de-escalate things for him. The interesting thing is that Cassie reached out to this gentleman. She said, "Oh, I bet that is X, who lives in the yellow apartment next door. Yeah, that's it. I know him." So she and a peer went and talked to him. And he also heard from some common people that both sides know that are kind of working to bring us together. And he changed his tune. And he actually later volunteered. I mean, just a few weeks later, came to us and said, "I'm really sorry about what happened. I regret that. And I'm a tiler. Can I tile the new bathroom in your shelter?"
Wow.
And he did.
A lot of people seem to be waiting on the Supreme Court to weigh in on homelessness and whether local municipalities can intervene when people sleep on the street or in parks or in tents. Like Governor Gavin Newsom of California filed an amicus brief in this case. He seems to want reasonable limits, is what he said, on camping in public places. Is there a reasonable limit?
I was afraid you were going to say that. I don't know. I mean, what's reasonable is also has to be affordable and has to be dignified and has to honor people's basic human rights. But I'm just hoping that it won't end with a one-line statement saying Grants Pass wins and they can criminalize homelessness. It's a more nuanced plan that we need than, a bumper sticker. I mean, and what I'm worried about is if it becomes, it's now common law that people shouldn't be leaving in the parks. I feel it's going to really energize the anti-homeless community to take action. So I'm really worried about not only the mental health challenges we see people having now, just being stressed and being harassed, but what's going to happen if now they're caught camping in a park and the police aren't around. Well, we'll just help them move along. I worry about that, and I know they worry about that too. And there's really no place to go.
Do you think about where would they go?
You leave Grants Pass 2 to 3 miles, and you're in open farmland and forest. So where are they going to go? They're going to go into the national forests, and we already have a major fire problem, and every year we face drought and dry woods and fires that can be devastating. So it'll jeopardize the community's safety, and it's going to make it very hard for our team to try to follow people that need follow-up for whatever health problem they have, whether it's acute or chronic. It's going to make it very hard for us to locate for the emergency room people that need to be seen for follow-up on wounds or broken bones or post-surgical needs. And we do that now, and we're very proud to do that, and the hospital really appreciates it. But if we can't find out where they are, we can't help them. So dispersing them into the wild is not going to fix anything, and it really raises the risk of public health issues countywide.
Bruce and his colleagues at Mint aren't giving up on these patients, though. They're trying to make a plan for how to help, regardless of what the Supreme Court says. In fact, just a few days before the justices heard the Grants Pass case, the City Council approved Mint's plan to open a year-round shelter, one they say is going to be more inclusive than what's available now. It'll take them a few months to get it up and running. They want to open their doors before it gets too cold. Do you imagine what it's going to be like when the shelter opens its doors? How it'll change people's lives?
Oh, we've seen that twice. We saw it when the first time we took the van out in August when it was so smoky, we had people that couldn't breathe. Pollution index was off the scale in purple, and it was 95 degrees and 90-degree humidity. And we had an air-conditioned medical van, and the two women that came in first, both with asthma and breathing problems, came in, and they saw how pretty it was. It looked like an office, and they just started crying. When we opened the warming shelter, it just by coincidence, not only was it a cold, cold day, but it started snowing. An hour before we opened at 5 o'clock, it started snowing heavily at 4 p.m. We had a line of people to come in. At that time, we had 35 cots, and we ended up sleeping 50 that night because we brought in more mattresses. And people just couldn't believe that they had the option of escaping the weather. Not only did they love being cared for, but they volunteered to help. And it actually became a self-perpetuating process where those that in the parks were suddenly, ferrying the coffee and serving the food and cleaning the bathrooms. And it was a beautiful thing to watch. So we know what the reception will be like. It'll be overwhelming.
Dr. Bruce, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Bruce Murray is a retired doctor who provides medical care to the homeless community of Josephine County, Oregon. Dr. Murray's story is just the first of a number of conversations we're going to bring you about the people behind this year's Supreme Court decisions. After today, we're going to bring these episodes to you as the decisions come out, so stay tuned. And if you want to hear more about the decisions themselves, and we know you do, check out our sister podcast, Amicus, with Dahlia Lithwick. Amicus is Slate's podcast about the courts and the law and the U.S. Supreme Court. Find Amicus, that's AMICUS, wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, that's the show. If you're a fan of what we're doing here at What Next, the best way to support our work is to join Slate Plus. Go on over to slate.com/whatnextplus and sign up. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. We are led by Alicia Montgomery, with a little help from Susan Matthews. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you back here next time.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.